мною принято решение о проведении специальной военной операции.
Putin's special military operation isn't going well. It's estimated that over 100,000 Russian soldiers have died in Ukraine. As Putin's war drags on unsuccessfully, dissent against him is growing in Russia. Back in August, Russia occupied 62,000 square miles, almost 27% of Ukraine's territory. Since then, however, Ukraine has recaptured about 29,000 square miles and forced Russia out of Kherson, the only regional capital to be captured in the war. As the special military operation looks to be failing, the effects are being felt across Russia. Their economy is shaky, and Putin has been forced to conduct a very unpopular conscription.
The more land they lose in Ukraine, the further the authority of Vladimir Putin collapses in Russia and also internationally.
This is Dr Aliyev. He specializes in Russian security and law enforcement.
Over 1 million people have left Russia since the start of this mobilization recently, and most of these people are young people who have been involved in the economy, who have been paying taxes, and who are basically educated and capable to promote Russian economy. They have mostly left Russia, and we've also witnessed lots of businesses leaving Russia, international businesses, but lots of local businesses who cooperated and who imported or exported goods internationally. They have also went bankrupt, which means that millions of people become unemployed in Russia. We don't know the exact figures because the Russian government does not release the actual data. Instead, they keep on with their propaganda campaign that the economy is recovering, that the workforce is still going strong, and that inflation is limited, but all of this is artificially maintained. So we know that the Russian economy is literally in a very bad shape because of sanctions imposed on Russia, and because of the closure of so many businesses, because of people leaving the Russian Federation. So economically, Russia will probably take decades to recover. The same militarily. Russian military not only suffered a significant loss in terms of human resources, and they've also lost a significant number of aircraft, tanks, all sorts of military hardware, which will take decades to recover because Russian military industry is only capable to produce literally a handful of tanks every year, and they've lost hundreds and thousands of this military hardware units, which have weakened the Russian defense capacity incredibly.
Russia has paid and is continuing to pay a huge price for the invasion of Ukraine. Not only has the war failed in its original aims, but Russia is becoming politically and economically increasingly isolated.
Prior to the start of this military campaign, Russia firmly believed that it has this influence over the EU states, and because of the gas supplies, because of the oil supplies to a lesser extent, and they firmly believed that the EU states will not, or European states in general, will not interfere in Russia's campaign in Ukraine because of this dependence on Russian gas and because of trade connections between them and Russia, and that European countries will turn a blind eye to Russia's actions in Ukraine because of the economic interest. We've seen now that this was not the case, and this has certainly significantly weakened and basically reduced Russia's soft power to nothing, particularly in the European continent and obviously in North America as well, and many other parts of the world. And Russia doesn't have the same leverage it certainly used to have. Previously, Russia has tried to rely on various marginal, mostly far-right politicians in European countries, and even that is no longer an option for Russia. So it certainly has lost lots of soft power it used to have before the conflict, and it has lost any sort of official or significant influence over decision-making in European states. That's absolutely the case.
Internal criticism of the war is growing within Russia. Increasingly, right-wing pro-war Russians who would normally form the base of Putin's political support are taking issue with how the war is being conducted.
It's very interesting to see this internal disagreements developing within this patriotic camp, I would say, this pro-Ukrainian war camp, because much of that camp was created by Russian propaganda on purpose in the immediate beginning of the conflict and during the early stages of the war. So this enormous, massive machine of Russian propaganda has created this entire class of individuals at various walks of life, involved in reporting, involved in political life and social and cultural life, who have been continuously supporting this aggressive military actions in Ukraine. Now, as Russia has started to lose this military campaign on the ground, as it started to withdraw its troops from some parts of Ukraine, for example, from Kharkiv region, more recently they have declared that they will potentially be leaving the city of Kherson and the right bank of Kherson region. This has caused a lot of discontent, obviously, among those hardcore elements created by Russian propaganda and who have been supporting this propaganda for a really long time, but now they become those radical elements, which probably something that Putin would not prefer to deal with, because for them much of what Kremlin is doing recently is seen as defeatism, as something that basically weakens Russia's position in this conflict, and they're looking for traitors, they're looking for people responsible for that. They've been blaming the generals, military generals in charge of various areas of the front lines, and some of them have been removed from their positions, criticized by this propaganda camp, and so they're certainly looking for scapegoats. For now, Putin is not one of these scapegoats. He manages to maintain his image of a firm leader who has control over this military operation. But we're seeing more and more signs of discontent within this radical pro-war camp, and we see more fingers actually pointed in the direction of Kremlin, in the direction of Putin himself, who is more and more seen not necessarily as a person who controls everything, but possibly as a person who is actually willing to give up on some of these radical interests that these groups have.